Hi, in this lesson we are going to talk about SCSS and the files folder because it's the foundation for our SCSS in this project. Okay, remember we installed Nodejs, that library that I told you, where is it? This is it. This is the library that when the app is compiled or saved or built, all these SCSS files are converted to regular CSS. And you might ask what's with all these files. Well, first of all, we are going to go in GitHub and copy these SCSS files from the already built project, and we will understand them one by one. I have also pasted the GitHub link into the description below, and you can see all, and you can also see it on the screen right now. Also, you can see what we're going to build at alexmatthew.tech. Sorry, just go to this address and you will see the website we're going to build. This is my personal website, and by the end of the course you will have one similar to this. Also, I have here in resources a folder called fonts, and I have here fonts called SF Pro, which is a free font that Apple gives us. Please choose a font, and now please choose a font that you will use for this project, and do the same that I did. Create a folder called fonts in this resource folder and throw them all there. It should have a medium, bold, and light version of the font. I suggest you to use the same font as I did. You can download it from Apple. Just Google SF Pro Display download and you will find it. Alright, let's go on GitHub. This is my GitHub account. You see that the link that I showed you earlier. This is the already built project, so you can go ahead and explore it if you want. But what should you do right now is to go into the CRC folder, and you will see here there's the styles folder, and here are these files that you see here in styles: helpers, index, normalize, palette, typography, and variables. Just go ahead and copy these, copy the content within it. You can go and copy each one like this. Sorry, up like this, and you go ahead and say helpers.sss. I have already a file called helper, so helpers, and pass them all. We are going to go over each of these things later, so I don't need this file now. Okay, go over each file: index, normalize, palette, typography, and variables. And also let me just check the SF Pro Display font. Apple developer, okay. And I think you should be able to download it from here. Okay, so SF Pro, this one. Just download it. And you should have an archive with exactly these files. These files, just paste them all in this folder. So now we will have a font to work with. If for whatever reason you don't want this font, you can also choose yours, but just keep in mind I need a medium version, light version, and bold version. Alright, let's close this, and now let's look at each SCSS file. So first of all, let me just explain the difference between SCSS and regular CSS, and why we use it and why everyone does. I'm going to create an example file right here. So example, just to explain to you, example.scss, and it's actually called SASS, but the extension is .scss. And it allows us to do many different things that we are not able to do with regular CSS, like nesting, importing, mixins, and functions. And let me just explain to you what nesting is. So Say for example, in a regular CSS file, you would create a class called button, okay, and let's say the width is 300 pixels, and the height let it be 50, just for the sake of example. Now, for example, we have also a class that says that we use when this button is active. So we would name it button active, right? And it would have the same styles, okay? And let's say color is red because it's active somehow, okay? Well, that is the case with the regular and classic CSS. Now, what SCSS gives us or brings to the table is this thing. So you can say button. Let's copy this. Now we can write this and symbol and say, for example, dash active. And here we can take these and paste them here. Color red. So this is nesting. After the CSS is being compiled, this whole thing is being transformed to this thing. And you would write in div like so. So class name. Say we have button, and when we write button, what is going to be seen is these two CSS lines. When we are going to say button active, it will consider this line. So basically what SCSS does is when it sees this and symbol, that means that what is after this and symbol is being attached to this button, and it's created a new class. So button is one class, button dash active is another class. What it gives us is clarity and cleanliness. So when we are going to have a big project, we're going to have tons of classes, and it will be very chaotic with the regular CSS. But with SCSS we can have this structure much like HTML has with its parent and child. You will see that in practice when we start making our pages. But that's for the nesting part. Now regarding imports, SCSS allows us to have variables. And you can see I have a file here called palettes. Here we have the colors that we are going to use in the app. So you're not going to copy and paste the same hex code that represents the color to each time you want to set a color to a specific text or a div. That's not professional. So instead we have this file and we set the colors here, and the SCSS allows us to import this variable in other SCSS files, and voila, that's how we set colors. So let me just write an example here. In the example, we can use the same button example. So I'm gonna delete this. So say we want that our button, when it's active, to have this color primary blue. Since I have already built the application for myself, I already know the colors, and you just have to copy them. So back to our button. Say we want to have this color when our button is active, hypothetically when it's active. What we're going to do is to say add import. So this folder / palette.sss. Now we have in this example.css file, we have these variables. We have all of them. So when our imaginary button is going to be active, we want to have that color. So we're gonna go $primary blue. Primary blue. And what it will do, it will set this hex code to this color. So that's the same thing as writing like this. I think you got the idea. So but we're gonna use variables because we're not gonna paste the same hex code in every file that we want to have this blue color. Okay, so okay, that's with the variables and imports. Now we have mixin. So mixins are functions or type of functions that return CSS styles. So this way, say we're gonna create a mixin called cool background, for example, and it will return like with 100%, height of 100%, background color of white, whatever we want, so padding 0, padding 10, let's say. So as variables, they can be imported and we can use them whatever we want. Say you have a mixin that returns a bunch of CSS files, like in this example, and you need in your app to have the same CSS lines in different places. So mixins make our life easier because we write CSS lines once and then just import them anywhere we want, as opposed to writing the same thing over and over again in different places. So let's say, for example, this is a class for one of our page, so it's gonna say container I don't know, about, for example, and we want to have these lines here. We're gonna delete active. Okay, what we're gonna do is say include cool background, and this mixin can be in any SSS file here. So let's for the sake of example place it in palette, mixin cool, and now because we imported here palette, it will have access to all these things, all these variables, and this mixin. And when you will look in browser, you will see that this class has these lines. Okay, so that's how the mixin works. Let me just delete them. Okay, so that's mixins. We also have functions. Functions are different than mixins because they do not return CSS lines. Instead, they are regular functions. They just do some calculations and return a value or a number. For example, these functions also have for and if, like any programming language. I'm not going to go into details about how to write for and ifs in functions in SSS because it goes beyond the scope of this video. The only functions we have here in these SSS files are in the helpers file, and what they do is to convert pixels to rem. I hope you already know what rem are, and if not, rem is just a size unity like pixels. The thing is that it is relative to the base size in the whole app. So to make sense of that, let's open the file called variables here. You see we have a variable here called the base font size. Okay, this one, the first one. So what that means is that we created a variable with the default size of all the text in the whole app, and we attribute it to the body here in index.sss. See, body, font size, base font size. You remember the variable that we talked about earlier. So we imported these variables from variables, and we said that okay, font size for the whole body is going to be 16 pixels, I guess. Yeah, 16 pixels. So this is the base. That is the font size that all the paragraphs will have. And when we will create our SSS files for the React components, we will not write the font size like this with pixels, like 70 pixels, but with rem, with this like 1 rem. and we're not going to write like 1 rem or 2 rem or 1.5 rem, but just for you to understand, we will express the size of the fonts in rems, because rems are relative to the base size of the body. Okay, so 1 rem is whatever the size of the fonts we set in the body. And what we set in the body, you remember, was the baseline here of 16 pixels. So the default or the base in the body is 16 pixels of any font and paragraph or any text. Now we have these rem functions that, by the way, I have not written these functions. You can find them on GitHub or internet. It's open source. No one should waste time writing them, because they are already written and somewhere on the internet to help develop your app faster. So these functions are going to receive a value in pixels and are going to convert them into rem, because you can imagine we are not going to make the calculations in our head how many rems are 18 pixels per se. So let me just so we know that 1 rem is 16 pixels, right? Why is 16 pixels? Because we have here said so in the base font size, and we attribute this variable to the body in the index.css. And by the way, this file will be imported into index.tsx later, but the body now has the font size of 16 pixels, is the base where we were. And we know that 1 rem is whatever the base size is. So 1 rem is equal to 16 pixels. And say 18 pixels is, I don't know, 1.2 rem. And because we are going to express the font size when we're going to write our CSS with the rem, I can't know how many rems are 18 pixels, and that's when these functions come in handy. So when we are going to write SSS, we're gonna say font size of say it's a paragraph. Let me just write, for example, paragraph. Font size, we're not going to say 18 pixels. Instead, we are going to write a rem of 18 pixels. Okay, and I can access this rem function because I have the functions right here. If, for example, this is going to be in another file in the example, okay, this is not going to work. What we need to do is to import helpers. Import this function. Now I have access to the rem functions, and voila, our paragraph will be 18 pixels, which is going to be 1.2 rem or something like that. I know there is a lot to digest if you're not familiar with this, but this is what you need to know to advance your React skills or to be ready to take a React job. So let's recap this rem thing. So whenever we will set a font size of a text, we will not use pixel but rem. And we use rem because if we want to change the font size of the whole app, what we'll do is just change the font size, the base here. Okay, and all the sizes of all the fonts in the whole app will change with respect to this base size. Next, when we use the function rem that we have here in helpers, is actually this function that uses this function and so on. It uses each other. Okay, so when we have this function rem, it's going to say, you sent as a parameter 18 pixels. Let me check what is the base. Oh, that's 16 pixels. These functions do that. So it means that I should return 1.2 rem. So again, rem is a relative measurement unit. It always compares itself to the base. So 1 rem is the base. If the base is 5 pixels, then 1 rem is equal to 5 pixels. and 2 rem is respectively will be 10 pixels. If the base is 20 pixels, this base that we have set here and then set in this in the body as a variable. If that is 20 pixels, it means that 1 rem is 20 pixels and 2 rem is 40 pixels. Rem always compares itself with the font size that the body tag has. And the functions here in helpers are used to help us make those calculations by providing a function called rem that does that. Remember, variables, mixins, and functions are importable from one CSS file to another. And let's delete this. Okay, let's save, and let's save this file also. Okay. Along the way, in the next video, so while we will create the app, I will keep reinforcing this rem thing so you can understand it. And while other developers will write the font size in pixels, we're going to write them in rem because that's what good React developers do. Now let's speak about the typography SSS file right here. Okay, you saw we added some fonts here in the resources. Now we want that those fonts to be easily accessible anywhere we need them. Somewhere we might need the bold version and somewhere we might need the light version of the font, for example. So what we do is create a SSS file and use the power of mixins. You are already familiar with the font face, but what's below is a mixin for each version, or better say weight of the font. So for example, I created a mixin for the bold version of this font. I imported with the help of font face this font from my resource folder. I called it SF Pro Bold, and I created a mixin, which, remember, just returns plain CSS lines. I called it SF Pro Bold, and I say that key font family is going to be SF Pro Bold. And now I can import this SF. Now I can include this SF Pro Bold anywhere in this app where I want the font to be SF Pro Bold, obviously. So for example, I set in index.scss the default style of the body, and I said that the default font of the entire body is going to be SF Pro Medium. So we imported that mixin from the typography file. You see, import typography, and this is that SF Pro medium mixin that we imported. Now we imported it via the keyword include and the name of the mixin, and it will translate to that font family with the name in the font, And now the whole body will have as a default font the SF Pro Medium that we have defined here. Now the rest CSS here in the index are classes that we use globally. So I don't know if you know it, but all the SSS or CSS for that matter is accessible anywhere in the app. So these classes will be accessible literally everywhere in the app without even importing this file. And that's because when the React is compiled in the browser and the browser receives the files, all this SSS is being thrown in one file. The browser doesn't get this structure we have here, but after build or compilation, it creates a simple structure that the browser understands. Let me just show you something that you will understand. So let's save this file for now and let's start our app. Yarn start. And you will see in just a bit what I mean. Okay, it starts. Okay, it started. So you see, these are all the SSS files that we created, this palette, typography, everything. And now let's go ahead and inspect element on this page. and go to sources, and you see that's what the browser actually receives. You see that's not that's not the structure we have here. It's just a folder called static.js with the GS files, which are being compiled and built by the way, it's a library called Webpack that's built into React. And what it does, it takes everything here and creates these files. You see it's a big JS file. And also we will have here a folder called styles, I guess. We don't have it yet because we are not using any of these styles in our React component. So it's just because we don't use any styles yet, there is not that folder. So let's, for example, say so to see that folder, let's firstly delete this index CSS that has been generated by the create React app. We can delete this and actually import here from styles/index.sss. Okay, let's save this. Now our React app will have access to this, and in the browser there will appear a folder called styles when we will have React components that are going to use styles. For now we are not using any styles, so we're gonna leave it like this. Alright, let's look at the next file, normalize. So let's go back to our index.css. So the classes here are created by me, and I created them because we might use them in different places, like MB20, MB20, you see? So you see it's nested like MB5, MB10. After it is compiled, there is going to be a class called MB.5 with a margin button of 5 pixels, MB10, and so on. So there are a lot of places where we will want to add a margin of button of 20 pixels. We don't need to repeat ourselves with the same margin button of 20 pixels, right? Instead, we just add this class along with other classes in the div. So, for example, we have a div with a class name of container, and we want that this container to have a margin button of 20 pixels. We don't go into the container class, wherever it is, and add this margin button of 20 pixels. Instead, we're gonna go MB20, and because we have access to all these classes and we don't need to import them, it's easy to use them. I have here a margin right, padding, height, HR, margin button, margin top, uppercase, shadow, for some divs, shadow small, a smaller shadow, a bold, underline, color black. So, and just for the sake of this course, I'm going to delete some of them, and when the time comes where we're going to create them again, and you will see that in practice. So I'm going to delete button unavailable, bold, underline, let's say, and shadow at uppercase also. Okay, let me delete this. Now it's good. So that's with the index.sss. We just define here like the foundation for our app. We also say that the H2 is going to be 40 pixels, and you can see them as some settings. And we have here classes that are globally used everywhere when we will need them. Okay, now let's look at the normalize.sss. This is a file that basically normalizes the CSS. There was a file called reset.css that you will have in your HTML project, because by default a lot of things are messed up when you create a new HTML project. Well, this file does the same thing. It's like it cleans the place for us to not have problems. And if you don't know what's with the SCSS, it's a file reset.css that many people use to reset this CSS in their HTML project. I don't know if you remember, but when you start a simple HTML project and you start to fill the place with divs, you have a margin here, a little white space between our containers and the border. So this kind of CSS resets all this. And by the way, I have not written these files, by the way, and frankly, no one does. You can find them on internet and just use them to help develop your app faster. And let's go through all of them one by one last time. So I'm going to delete this example. So helpers, in helpers.css, here are the rem functions that are going to convert pixels to rem when we are going to set font size to anything. Okay, that's the functions here. Index.css is like index for the SCSS. It is being imported here in the index.tsx, and the whole app will have these styles. And because in index.css we have imported all these other SCSS files, this file includes all of them. Okay, the normalized file is just to clean the place, let's say. Palette is a file that has all the colors that we are going to use in our app. Typography is a file that is a SCSS file that gives us the font styles, and the variables are just variables that are being used in index.css and helpers. And these SCSS files are the foundation in terms of style for our app. These are like the tools from the toolshed for styling our app. Later we will have a CSS file for each React component, and these files, as I said, will be like helping tools. By the practice that we are going to do, you will have a better understanding when you finish this course. Now we're going to discuss about Bem, which is a naming methodology for CSS, but I'm not going to explain to you now because I think it will be hard for you to grasp it just by imagining how it will look like. So I will teach you the Bem methodology by doing CSS in the next videos. However, if you can't wait and want to get familiar with it, you can visit getbem.com. So getbem.com. But nonetheless, I will explain the Bem methodology to you while literally doing the styles.